This is Richard R.J. Eskow of the Zero Hour for Free Speech TV, and joining me now is Doyle Canning. Doyle is a candidate for Congress in Oregon. In which district? I'm sorry, I should have meant.
In the 4th District.
In the 4th District of Oregon. She is running against a long-time Democratic incumbent known as Pete DeFazio, and in a very short moment she's going to tell us why she's doing that. So first of all, Doyle Canning, thanks for joining us.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here.
And secondly, why are you running against Pete DeFazio? First of all, actually, I'm going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a mother of 2 young children. I'm a community organizer. I've been involved in social movements for about 20 years. I got my start in the streets of Seattle as a teenager, protesting the World Trade Organization.
1999.
That's
right.
Mm-hmm. And feeling the power of the coalition of working people and people who care about the planet coming together, standing strong against corporate power. And that's what I've spent my life doing and supporting, and now I'm running for Congress.
Okay, well that's exciting. And you are in Oregon. Which part of Oregon is that district?
Yeah, so I live in Eugene, Oregon, which is the 2nd largest city in Oregon. It's about 2 hours south of Portland. The 4th District covers the Eugene-Springfield area, the city of Corvallis, and out to the coast and down to Coos Bay and the California border.
And you're running in the Democratic primary.
I am.
So you're challenging a long-time Democratic incumbent, a guy who's well known in Washington, D.C., where I am based, named Pete DeFazio. Why are you challenging Pete DeFazio?
2020 is a turning point for the progressive movement, and it's going to kick off a new decade of what we hope are real structural reforms in how we run our country, our economy, and take care of the planet for future generations. And I'm ready to lead that decade of change. I have a vision for the future of Oregon and the future of our country that relies on renewable energy, an inclusive, multiracial, democratic community and society. And it's time for people of my generation to step forward and lead us into the 21st century from a progressive track record and a moral center. Our country is in a crisis. There are children dying in what can only be described as concentration camps right now, as we sit here today. That is happening. And if we're not able to be bold and make demands from both the Trump administration, but also the larger elite class of billionaires that are running the country to make deep, structural, transformative demands on that system, this kind of agenda of racism and planetary chaos that we're seeing with the climate crisis will only increase. We have to stand strong and stand together with a vision for the future.
So when I look at somebody primarying a long-term Democrat like DeFazio, a lot of times I think clearly there are ideological differences. I mean, some people are more to the left than others in the Democratic Party, and I'm definitely more to the left. But I also think we can talk about that, we can talk about issues, but I also think there's a question of a theory of change. And I think that, I don't know Pete DeFazio, but I would assume that Pete DeFazio would say, well, I want most of the things you want, Doyle Canning, and your friends want and your allies want, but I think the best way to do them is working with my Republican colleagues, and I've got 30 years doing that. And I think part of what you're saying, or what I find implicit in what you're saying, is that we need a new theory of change. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's just me talking. And so where does that fit in? Would you say that your differences with Pete DeFazio, clearly you think you would be a better representative for this district than Pete DeFazio? He may be a lovely man, but clearly you've made that determination for yourself. Is it because you have different goals? Is it because you have a different theory of change, or is it both, some combination of both?
So there's a lot in what you're saying. I think what makes my style of leadership different is I come from a different generation. I know the struggles of young working families today because that's who I am. I've come of age in an America and lived in an Oregon that is vastly different than the Oregon or the America of the 1980s. And I can speak to the struggles that young families have today. I just graduated from the University of Oregon School of Law with $66,000 in debt. That's my second chunk of student debt. My education has cost me over $100,000. And a lot of that money for me was spent on childcare. I'm raising 2 young children. I know these struggles because I'm living them. And I live in a community of working people. And after 34 years with the same representation, it's time for Oregonians to have a real choice about what the future of our country and our party is going to look like. And yes, it is a question about a theory of change. I think my theory of change is that people, working people, coming together and running a people-powered style campaign like we've seen by other candidates across the country who are running these kinds of insurgent campaigns, from Bernie Sanders to Elizabeth Warren to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying no to corporate money and trying to build something that is truly inclusive and democratic and accountable to constituencies rather than corporations. That's the way I'm going to lead. That's the way I'm going to run my campaign and lead for the people of my district. And the theory of change piece really is related to this question of how do we position vis-a-vis the Trump administration. On election night in 2018, Congressman DeFazio, who by all means has done a lot of great things for our district, he's served our district for a long time, for over 30 years, but he said on election night in 2018 that his top priority would be working with Trump on a bipartisan infrastructure bill. And as chair of transportation and infrastructure, that is, what the party has chosen is the priority. That is not the priority of the people in the 4th District of Oregon. And I think it's reflective of a larger dynamic where we have a younger generation that is more diverse and more progressive than the previous generations and wants to deal with the Trump administration in a different way. It's talking about impeachment, it's talking about closing the camps, not just guardrails or more toothbrushes, but this is a human rights atrocity. So we can't negotiate with an administration that is perpetuating that kind of crime. It's about a different position and a different kind of leadership. And that's the leadership that I want to bring to represent the people in my district.
So let me ask you then, and again, we're talking with Doyle Canning, who is running in a primary against Representative Pete DeFazio on Oregon's 4th congressional district. So let me ask you, I've talked to other people like Pramila Jayapal, who was an activist like yourself and became a member of Congress, about the whole notion of inside-outside strategy. To what extent should a member of Congress be a member of a movement, work with a movement? What is the relationship between an elected official and independent activists? I mean, I've been an activist. I worked for Bernie Sanders, so I've worked for candidates. I've been an independent activist. There are ways in which they're different, right? And there are ways in which they can collaborate. But what's your vision of this sort of inside-outside or movement versus elected official strategy?
Yeah, I think that's precisely my vision, is how can I lead and work in service to the movements that I'm a part of and support and am accountable to. For example, in Oregon's 4th District, there is a proposed pipeline, a fracked gas pipeline that's going to run, if they put it in the ground, over 200 miles across the state of Oregon to the ocean to export fracked gas to overseas markets. Movements in the communities down in southern Oregon where this pipeline is proposed have been fighting this project, the Jordan Cove project, for over a decade. And they haven't had a champion in the Democratic Party of Oregon. I'm willing to be that champion and to also work accountably with that community in a way to advance the alternative vision that they want to see. In precisely the same area of the state, we have tremendous potential for offshore wind, for solar power, for incredibly effective carbon sequestration with our ancient forests. This is the future of Oregon that people in the community want to see. And we need a champion who's willing to fight for that vision and to be humble and in dialogue with the people that we're serving. And that will be my approach.
So day one, you upset Pete DeFazio, you get the nomination, you win. Day one, you're finding your office in that House building, you're learning your way through. Who's the first call you make when you sit down at your new desk for the first time?
I think my first call would be to some of the leaders that I work with in my community, in my district, and I would say thank you. That would be my first call. My second call might be to Representative Jayapal and asking for, humbly requesting her mentorship and guidance.
Okay, well, those are good answers, and I think probably that's a pretty good place to stop. So why don't we do that? Doyle Canning, candidate for Congress in Oregon's 4th District. Best of luck to you, and thanks for talking with us. I'm Richard R.J. Eskow, and this is Free Speech TV.